Alright, I'm finally going to do the thing. I'm going to answer the question. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like a lot. And in thinking about it, I realized the call is coming from inside the house. That is, the guidelines to positive masculinity can be found within the less positive framework that we have been taught. Pretty much every construct given to us by traditional masculinity can either be used to our benefit or to our detriment, but I'll get to that. Hi squad, welcome back, and dog bless you. As you can see, I've got a little bit of a different setup here, and if you are looking at that acoustic phone behind me thinking that it looks like it was installed by someone who has no idea what they're doing, or at the very least somebody who didn't have the mental energy to look up a tutorial as to how to do it properly, that's because both of those things are correct. It was me, and yeah. But let's get to the part where I admit that I was wrong. I have been making an effort to drop the term toxic masculinity for myriad reasons. But to summarize, I think it carries way too many misunderstandings and misconceptions, which makes it very useless when it comes to trying to reach the people that I would like to talk to. Which is men, by the way. I'm talking to men. Everyone else is welcome to stick around for the ride, but please keep that in mind. So, instead of toxic masculinity, you're going to hear me using a different term. And I'm going to tell you what it is, but before I do, I want to get one very important thing out in the open. Fellas, patriarchy is not a synonym for men. So when I use the word patriarchy, I'm not talking about you specifically, or even men as a group. And this is a miscommunication issue that both patriarchy and certain feminist constructs are responsible for. It's not women versus men, it's not even women versus patriarchy. It is patriarchy versus everyone, including men. And its structure is reinforced by women as well. Even some of the ones who think that they're fighting it. Too often I see guys getting defensive in response to the mere mention of the word because they have been given the incorrect idea that it is a system enforced entirely by men wherein all men benefit just by being men. But that just isn't the case. And I could talk all day about what patriarchy actually is and its history and what it actually entails, but for the purpose of this video, I would like to stress just one angle. And that is the dominance-based masculinity that we all learn under patriarchy. As men, we are pressured to embody it, and as humans in general, regardless of gender, to shame any man who fails in this effort. When I use this word, what I am describing is a collection of gender roles that have created a social climate that is detrimental to everyone. So with that laid out, we are going to talk about how patriarchy hurts men and boys, and how we can set ourselves free. And I'm hoping you'll leave this video with a better understanding of how we've been oppressed by this system, a clearer path to your own liberation, and a greater sense of security in your identity as a man. But before we get to internal security, let's take a moment for external security by talking about today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. Do you ever catch yourself browsing the internet thinking, gee, this whole experience would be a lot more pleasant if I had access to content all over the world and encrypted data that protected me from malware, annoying advertisements, and having my activity tracked? Well, you're in luck, because Atlas VPN has you covered on all counts. Atlas VPN is a virtual private network that protects your data and disguises your IP address, so you can safely browse public Wi-Fi, protect yourself from viruses and malware, and enjoy your internet surfing without worrying about your data being plundered. Atlas VPN not only covers unlimited devices under one subscription, they're also the most affordable option on the market right now because of a huge holiday deal that they have going. You can get Atlas VPN Premium for only $1.70 a month plus 6 months free with a 30-day money-back guarantee by clicking the link down in the description. In addition to having your back on the security front and being wildly affordable, Atlas VPN lets you access geo-restricted content on streaming platforms. I personally love the freedom of getting to enjoy whatever content I want regardless of licensing restrictions because Canadian Netflix only gets me so far. I also really appreciate how much Atlas VPN has helped my online shopping game. A lot of websites tweak prices based on location, and they also like to hike prices on you every time you revisit them. Atlas VPN lets you get around this so that you can save money on your gift shopping this year. Definitely made a difference for me. So have a private holiday season and a safe new year with Atlas VPN Premium. Act now and you can get it for $1.70 a month plus 6 months free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Just click the link in the video description below to sign up for the special holiday season deal right now. Thanks so much to Atlas VPN for partnering with me for this video. Now let's get back to it. This is something that has been talked about at length before, but it bears mentioning until it sticks. The negative double standards that hurt boys and men come from patriarchy. We've talked about misunderstandings and defensiveness already, so let's talk about another reason why I think that this fails to click into place for a lot of guys. Put simply, I think it's because it's usually added as an afterthought when discussing other ills associated with this system, so I'm going to go ahead and just put it center stage. Not only does it hurt men through its harm to women and non-binary people, it hurts men directly. The patriarchal construct that men are strong and women are weak is where we get the expenditure of male bodies in the military and workforce. It's also where we get the idea that boys and men should not express any kind of vulnerability by showing emotion. The patriarchal idea that a real man is a dominant man who always takes the lead is where we get bullying between boys and the societal pressure on men to be financially successful and always able to provide. And the combined force of men are strong and real men dominate creates a cage that bars us from developing emotional skills, capacity for cooperation, and soul-enriching abilities and pursuits like art for its own sake, asking for help, and even basic self-care. I have run into way too many guys who are uncomfortable with just the idea of having a skincare routine. Like having skin is somehow gender specific. Just put the moisturizer on, boys. It's okay. If anyone comes for your man card over it, dazzle them into silence with your glorious complexion. I tease. But actually, you know what? Not really. No, I completely stand by everything I just said. But I think that this is an example of one of the problems that we run into when talking about this sort of thing. Because when topics like men not taking care of themselves are brought up, they usually begin and end with side-eyeing and mockery. So I want to take a different approach. Because a lot of people are ready to scoff at men scoffing at self-care. But I would sincerely like to know why so many dudes think that they aren't worth taking care of. Really, why is that? Why is pampering yourself or just looking after yourself stereotyped as something that men don't do? I've usually seen this question answered by saying that it's just straight up misogyny, because the activity itself is feminine and femininity is bad for some reason. But I don't think it's that simple. So I'm going to float another possibility. Could it be, perhaps, at least in part, that many of us have internalized the idea of male expendability and therefore think that we are not worth the personal time, care, and attention. And I don't even mean from anyone else. I think that's part of it in certain contexts, but just ourselves, just looking after yourself, taking some time for yourself. If this is something that resonates with you, take a second to ask yourself where that thinking comes from. It's patriarchy. It's patriarchy. In focusing only on the misogyny at play here, the avoidance of certain behaviors for fear of being feminine, I think we miss some of the ways that patriarchy intersects with manhood specifically. Now, don't get me wrong, I have an entire video about how liberating it is to break away from the fear of appearing feminine and to smash the incorrect assumption that femininity is weakness. That's obviously a big part of it. But a lot of men, rightfully so, have expressed issues with making this the focus. Because as much as we need to dissociate specific genders from universal human behaviors, capacity to embrace femininity doesn't necessarily address where masculinity is hurting. Traits associated with manhood deserve their own scrutiny as to how enriching and useful they are to men. So let's dig deeper. Self-sufficiency is another behavior that is touted as quintessential to manhood. On its own, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Independence and self-direction are really good skills to have, but how they manifest under patriarchy specifically is a problem. The stereotype of inherent male independence, or trying to train this trait into boys, leads to harmful double standards like assuming boys need less emotional support and withholding affection from them. Now, more recent data does suggest that gender differences when it comes to how parents treat their children are actually less pronounced than they used to be. But it is hard to measure certain subtle biases, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing how little academic attention has been placed on emotions and how they affect our health and development. So I'm just gonna ask, if you're a man, was there a time when you noticed people stopped hugging you, comforting you, or even just asking how you're feeling? Having faced this shift in adulthood, it was pretty blatant, but I can see how, for a guy who is still quite young, just moving from boyhood to manhood, it would be subtle enough to miss. This shift is typically framed as a push for self-sufficiency, not necessarily consciously, but what it often ends up teaching is isolation. When we keep this in mind, it makes a lot of sense that we see so many young men searching for community and often coming together via that shared sense of isolation. But unfortunately, when you are unified by emptiness, all you get is more nothing. When the line between independence and isolation is blurred, we can fall into a trap of glorifying loneliness, admiring male role models specifically for being detached, for having influence rather than meaningful relationships. We're given the idea that influence can serve as an adequate stand-in for emotional connection, but it can't. We are social animals. It is integral to our being, and there is nothing outside of a genuine connection with other humans that can meet that need. Throwing yourself into the pursuit of influence and admiration is more likely to lead you to a sunk cost fallacy than to any meaningful relationships. Already this far into it, might as well stick it out and see if you finally get what you need. Never mind that the entire time you are running further and further away from what is likely to actually fulfill you, reinforcing the idea of other people as instruments of status rather than real human beings that you can foster connections with. Now, I know there are inevitably going to be a few people in the comments going, source, but this is intended to spur consideration and self-reflection. And guys, I know I lean into the brainless gym bro aesthetic, but I did spend 4 years in university studying this stuff, and then an additional 7 years following, unofficially continuing to study it. Just give me some credit. It was expensive. One of the snags in studying this topic is that it often, not always, but often requires self-report. That is, it is difficult at best to control for men being less likely to admit to loneliness or other emotional struggles, and that has presented a problem when looking into this issue. It's hard to ensure honesty, accuracy, and self-awareness regarding feelings when the thing that you are specifically looking into is a lack of emotional skills. But we know men struggle with mental health. We know male isolation is a huge problem. And we know that men, statistically, are more likely to succumb to unaliving. So let's talk about what the research has shown us. Isolation appears to be predictive of depressive symptoms in men. Studies examining loneliness as reported by men and women seem to indicate greater isolation in men. Associated with this is lower life satisfaction, lower social skills, and higher levels of distress. In regards to patriarchal masculinity, one cross-cultural study comparing Turkish, Norwegian, and US men found that there was a pretty strong association between endorsement of traditional masculine constructs and lower competency with interpersonal relationships. A 2016 systemic review of 37 different studies found a strong association between traditional masculinity and failure to seek help for mental health struggles. An earlier study looking into this particular issue found that even when men do seek help, endorsement of traditional masculinity was associated with poorer outcomes. The point is, when we go down the research rabbit hole, the dominance-based masculinity that patriarchy foists on us is consistently revealed to be harmful to boys and men. It sets us up to hurt ourselves and each other. And here we reach the problem of what to do about it. Because we can't simply remove these masculine archetypes associated with bad times and call it a day. That leaves a lot of guys out there looking for something to try and fill that space. And what happens when a whole bunch of people who have been barred from developing emotional intelligence go out seeking validation and role models? Well, at best we get edgelord culture, idolizing emotionally inept men and seeking out communities that validate this deficiency instead of educating out of it. And at worst, we get attempts to garner influence and relevance through violence. Now, the responsibility for violence is on the people committing it. No amount of isolation and emotional suffering is justification to harm others. But it is just wrong to act like cultural influences don't play a role in this. When you take a template away, you risk it being replaced by the next most readily available thing, and spend 10 minutes looking at social media and the news and ask yourself if that's a risk that you would like to take. I've said it before, but we cannot just solve this problem by saying, I don't know what you should do, just don't do this. That doesn't work even under the best of circumstances, and it's particularly unrealistic to do this with a group of people who haven't even been given the tools to build a replacement, let alone the plans as to what it should look like. It's frustrating. And not only are there people out there looking to exploit that frustration, it often gets channeled toward the most visible target rather than the right one. Much of the hurt that we experience as men is displaced toward the women who are challenging the very system that is hurting us in the first place. And this is another way that patriarchy feeds on us like a fucking parasite, self-regulating by turning a group of people that it's hurting against another group of people that it's hurting. It keeps us compliant with empty promises, telling us that if we just play the game as it's laid out, we'll get rewarded, but the game is rigged in favor of a tiny minority. And that ruling minority is deeply committed to making sure that they have unquestioning reinforcers who are willing to defend it just for the chance of fighting over the scraps that they leave behind. It is so ironic that so many of the men who have internalized this idea that true manliness is dominance continue to themselves be dominated by a system that benefits someone else. Call it the paradox of patriarchy. By working within its rules, you will forever be subservient to something bigger, stronger, and more dominant than you. Something that promises you happiness while actively striking down your ability to find it. So it becomes a question of whether or not you have the will to challenge it, to step out of the restrictive man box and take a chance on blazing your own trail. Because by seeing it for what it is, you can get out. You can become your own man if that's what you want, and you can decide what that is supposed to look like. So with that lead in, I'm hoping this answer won't just seem like a cop-out. Because positive masculinity is whatever we want it to be. It is what men build together and model for boys to give them a brighter, happier future. But far be it from me to leave it there and not provide some examples of some of the ways that we can do this. I personally think that a good stepping off point is to actually examine what patriarchy has taught us, and then ask how we can repurpose that into something that serves us rather than something we serve. So, as an example, let's look at physical strength. Now, not all men are physically strong, and being physically strong does not make someone a man, but this is a pretty universal masculine attribute across a great many cultures. Patriarchy champions this trait specifically by laying the groundwork for violence. It asserts that male strength exists for the purpose of competition and dominance, and that violence is inevitable because of this. This framing not only excludes men who are not physically powerful, but it leaves no room for cooperation, and it sets up a framework for relationships that are inherently competitive and demand submission from other people. And let's be realistic for a moment here, boys. Is this it? Like, is this what we want? Like, let's assume for a moment that you actually are the most dominant guy. You are the most domineering person in any given room at any given time, and everyone submits to you. But do they like you? Maybe you don't care whether or not they do, but I promise you that no amount of respect without actual affection is a remedy for emotional loneliness. In this context, submission is defeat, and there is no love to be found there. So how can we turn male strength into something that brings us connection rather than something that scares others away? Well, let's ask ourselves what the pro-social flip side of physical strength might look like. Instead of masculine strength being characterized by power and dominance, we can reconceptualize it as something protective and collaborative. One of the most common responses that I get when I ask people to name the first trait that they think of when they hear positive masculinity is protection. Strength specifically for the purpose of helping other people feel safe. So many of us have this capacity, and it feels really good to develop it and then reach a place where other people trust you. Not to be confused with trying to protect people who are not asking for it. Mind you, what I'm describing here is more setting a precedent that says you're a safe person to call upon when needed. That is how strength can be mutually empowering. Pumping iron is all well and good. Personally, I am a big fan, but regardless of the numbers on the plates, a much more impactful measure of your strength is how well you can lift the people around you. Figuratively, mind you. Not literally, at least not unless you have permission. But this isn't just about fostering healthier relationships and helping the people around us feel safe. This approach also frees us from the pressure of always having to be on, always having to be dominant and showing it. And it still lets us embrace the idea of masculine strength, if that is something that we feel is important to our identities as men. The point here is that physical power does not have to be violent. Ask any martial artist and they'll tell you it actually takes a lot more strength to pull a punch than to follow through with it. You can celebrate being powerful and how it defines your identity specifically by applying it in healthy ways. Embracing dominance and violence is one of the ways that patriarchy keeps us subservient. We have a lot less time and energy to self-actualize when we're preoccupied with some asinine competition, and you become very easy to manipulate when your baseline is one of constantly having to prove your manhood. All someone has to do is put you in a situation where you feel it's under threat and boom, you're their pawn. But you don't gotta prove f*** all, my guy. And if you do feel that pressure, it might be worthwhile to ask yourself where it's coming from and who it's serving. Because another service we're told to give patriarchy goes back to the idea of being expendable. That male bodies are tools of violence to feed the machine, owed to labor and war efforts. This is usually smuggled into our psyches in a Trojan horse labeled courage and dedication. It begins with encouragement of recklessness and acting out amongst boys, a sort of devil-may-care attitude when it comes to self-preservation and consideration of others. It twists courage into compliant foolishness. But courage is not the absence of fear or caution. Courage isn't willingness to throw your life away. Courage is being scared of something that needs to be done and doing it anyway. Like, say, challenging traditional gender constructs at the risk of ridicule. Rather than simply looking for grandiose ways to flaunt our fearlessness, we should ask ourselves what we truly fear and how we can face it. This is what I was trying to get at in my video about vulnerability. It is not easy to go against the tide of patriarchal, dominance-based masculinity. In fact, it's quite terrifying. To use a personal example, I have faced backlash just by being myself and talking about the topics that I talk about. I am often scared to put myself out there because of this, but I do it anyway, because it needs to be done. because enough people have told me that it helps them. That on its own is reason enough. But knowing that I'm helping people and the genuine connections that come from that make me feel good more so than the backlash makes me feel bad. And this incredible thing happens when you just start focusing on doing the things that make you happy and defining masculinity as you would like it to be defined, when you step outside of this dominance-based patriarchal manhood that we're taught. Which is that when you leave the competition, you crush the very idea that your manhood is something that needs to be defended in the first place. You can ask yourself why you ever felt the need to prove anything to a group of people who built their own identities around being defensive and judging others. Once you've escaped this thinking, you have a lot more space to explore the fact that masculinity is whatever you want it to be. You unlock a whole lot of autonomy around what it can look like and how you can customize it to be more fulfilling. And like I said, this does not mean you have to throw everything out and charge naked into nothingness with no sense of direction. But it does mean that you unlock the ability to examine the constructs you've been given and to ask yourself whether or not they're working for you or you're working for them. I'm not about to sit here and tell you that it's easy. It's not. But it is worth it. That much I can promise. In sum, patriarchal masculinity is the path of least resistance and least fulfillment. It is compliant, competitive, and imposed upon us. Conversely, positive masculinity requires boldness. It is active, courageous, and consciously chosen. So choose. If you've been playing the game and you're still hurting, stepping away isn't giving up, it's breaking out, and it takes a lot of strength and bravery to do that. I will be speaking more about this, because I think a key component here is making examples of positive masculinity more visible. Archetypes to fill that space that is left behind when we throw away the things that aren't helping us. So you can expect to see more content coming your way discussing men, both real and fictional, who exemplify positive masculinity. Until then, sound off below about your own male role models and what you love about them. I will see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching. Ma'am, madam, would you don't, please? Thank you. Freaking red squirrels. It's gonna, yep.